Hello, everyone. Since January 1974, a series of attacks on women began occurring in the Seattle area of Washington state. The suspect would wear a mask, sneak into girls' homes late at night, beat them unconscious with a club, and assault them. Within just 6 months, almost every month saw a young woman reported missing. The suspect gradually expanded his range of operations, from initial robberies and assaults to cold-blooded murder. The victims were all beautiful young women, mostly college students with long hair parted down the middle. The suspect always wore a mask during the crimes and cleaned the crime scenes meticulously, making the police investigation extremely difficult. By June 1974, late one night, a girl named Georgianne Hawkins disappeared in an alley on her way home. The next day, police searched the entire alley, but found no trace of her. Witnesses reported seeing a man on crutches near where the girl vanished that night. The man was carrying a briefcase and had a cast on his leg. Due to limited clues, the police could not locate this man. Georgianne's relative was a journalist. Upon learning of the incident, they published articles that drew significant public attention. The Lake Sammamish abductions. It turned out that over the past half year, a series of disappearances of young women had occurred in Seattle, leaving locals terrified. Police compiled information on several missing women and discovered their disappearances coincided with university exam periods in the area. Most disappearances happened near construction sites. Many witnesses reported seeing a man with a leg cast driving a Volkswagen Beetle. Due to the similarities, police believed the perpetrator was likely the same person. On July 14, 1974, 5 young women were relaxing on the beach at Lake Sammamish State Park in Washington. A handsome man in a white tennis outfit approached them. One of his arms was in a sling. He introduced himself as Ted. Because of his injury, he asked the 5 women to help him unload a sailboat from his car. 4 of them refused. However, a young woman, 23 years old, agreed to help him enthusiastically. She followed the man to his car, but she realized there was no sailboat. Having heard about the recent serial disappearances, she sensed something was wrong and immediately ran back to the crowd. Her vigilance allowed her to escape. However, later that same day, 2 other girls were reported missing at that park. The investigation and Ted. Many witnesses saw a suspicious man with his arm in a sling. Police created a sketch of the suspect based on witness descriptions and plastered them all over the streets of Seattle. Police received hundreds of tips daily. One of them pointed to a suspect, Ted Bundy, 28 years old, a local university student with excellent grades and no criminal record. Police found 8 witnesses from the park that day and showed them photos of Ted. However, 7 out of 8 said it wasn't him. Police also believed that someone like Ted was unlikely to commit such crimes. Without evidence, they released him. In reality, during high school, he had been arrested multiple times for theft, but those records were expunged when he turned 18. Sometime later, a hiker reported finding a skeleton about 3 kilometers from Lake Sammamish State Park. Police arrived and found 2 more skeletons, a total of 3. It was confirmed they were the recently missing girls, including the missing college student, Georgianne. The move to Utah and Carol Daronch. Following the spree in Seattle, women began disappearing in Salt Lake City, Utah. Bodies of 2 girls were found in the forest, showing signs of severe trauma and assault. The suspect was cautious, leaving few clues. Since U.S. states didn't share information effectively at the time, they didn't know the Seattle and Salt Lake City cases were connected. On the night of November 8, 1974, during a light rose, a girl burst into a police station in Salt Lake City to report a crime. Her name was Carol Daronch, 18 years old. She said that after work, she planned to go to a bookstore. A handsome man approached her, claiming to be a police officer, and told her someone was trying to steal her car. Carol didn't know how he found her, but she followed him to the parking lot. Carol became suspicious and asked for his ID, but he just smiled and ignored her. When they reached her car, it was actually missing. or so she thought. The man claimed it might have been towed and asked her to come to a substation to file a report. Anxious to get her car back, she got into his car. However, instead of a police station, he drove toward a deserted building. Carol realized something was wrong and demanded to get out. The man stopped the car, suddenly grabbed her arm, pulled out a gun, pointed it at her head, and threatened to kill her. Carol managed to open the door and jump out. Luckily, a passing car stopped and took her to the police station. After investigating, police identified several suspects, including Ted Bundy. Carol immediately identified him from photos. Suspicion against Ted grew. Back in Washington, police received a call from Elizabeth Klopfer, Ted Bundy's girlfriend. She had reported him months earlier regarding the Lake Sammamish disappearances, but police hadn't taken it seriously. Hearing about the Utah cases, she reported him again. Police investigated and found Ted's movements matched the locations of the disappearances, but they still lacked physical evidence. On August 16, 1975, a Utah police officer spotted a VW Beetle driving slowly through a residential area late at night. When the driver saw the police, he tried to speed away but was blocked. The passenger seat was removed. Inside that they found a ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, rope, and other tools. The driver was Ted. He claimed the mask was for skiing and he found the handcuffs in a dumpster. The officer was suspicious and took him in. Investigators searched his apartment but found nothing conclusive, so he was released on bail. However, Washington police combined their bills and listed Ted as a prime suspect. Ted's background. Ted Bundy was born in November 1946. His birth name was Theodore Cowell. His mother was unmarried, and his biological father abandoned them. His grandparents raised him as their son to hide the shame, and Ted grew up believing his mother was his sister. His grandfather was violent and delusional. Under his influence, Ted showed strange behavior early on, such as placing knives around his sleeping family members and smiling. In 1950, his mother took him to Washington and married his stepfather, Johnny Bundy. Ted never fit in. In high school, he was a loner, peeping into windows to watch women undress. In 1965, he entered college and started dating a wealthy girl named Stephanie Brooks. She eventually broke up with him because she felt he lacked ambition. This breakup devastated Ted and became a turning point. Around this time, he also discovered the truth about his parentage, that his sister was actually his mother. To deal with his depression, he traveled, then returned to Washington in 1969, appearing transformed. He began dating Elizabeth Klopfer, a single mother. He re-enrolled in the University of Washington for psychology, excelling in his studies and even working for the suicide hotline and political campaigns. By 1973, he reunited with Stephanie Brooks. He was now successful and confident. He courted her until they were engaged, then suddenly cut off all contact, ghosting her as revenge for the earlier breakup. While dating Elizabeth, Ted was actually living a double life. In 1974, when police released the sketch of the suspect named Ted with a Beetle, Elizabeth realized it looked exactly like her boyfriend. She found a crowbar, a bag of plaster, and crutches in his room. When she confronted him, he threatened her. Finally, in 1975, after Ted moved to Utah and was arrested, police interrogated Elizabeth about his sexual habits. They seized his sold VW Beetle and found hair samples matching 3 victims: Melissa Smith, Karen Campbell, and Carol Duronk. This connected the crimes across states. In February 1976, Ted was tried for the kidnapping of Carol Duronk. Thanks to her testimony, he was convicted and sentenced to 15 years. He was then extradited to Aspen, Colorado, to face murder charges. On June 7, 1977, acting as his own lawyer, Ted was allowed to use the courthouse library without handcuffs. He jumped out of a second-story window and escaped into the mountains. He hid for 6 days before being recaptured, starving and injured. Back in jail in Glenwood Springs, he plotted another escape, with help from a friend, Carol Boone, who smuggled him cash, and a hacksaw he bought from another inmate. He sawed a hole in the ceiling of his cell. He lost 16 kilos, 35 mouths, to fit through the crawl space. On December 30th, 1977, while most guards were off for Christmas, he crawled through the ceiling, broke into the jailer's apartment, changed clothes, and walked out the front door. Ted made his way to Chicago, then Florida. Running out of money and unable to use his real ID, he returned to his old ways. On the night of January 14th, 1978, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University, bludgeoning and strangling 4 women, killing 2. He then attacked another student nearby. On February 15th, 1978, he was pulled over in a stolen car in Pensacola, Florida. Inside, police found IDs of female students and stolen items. The final trials. In 1999, the trial of the century began in Florida. Ted acted as his own attorney again, charming the media. However, a crucial piece of evidence sealed his fate. A bite mark found on the buttocks of one of the Chi Omega victims matched Ted's teeth perfectly. During the penalty phase of a subsequent trial in 1980, Ted dramatically proposed to Carol Boone while she was on the witness stand. Under a specific Florida law, this constituted a legal marriage. He was sentenced to death. While on death row, Carol visited him, and she even gave birth to a daughter conceived in prison. Ted spent years appealing his sentence. As the execution date in 1989 approached, he tried to buy time by confessing to over 30 murders across Washington, Utah, Colorado, Florida, Oregon, Idaho, and California. He provided details on where bodies were buried, hoping the governor would delay the execution. But the families of the victims refused. They wanted justice. On the morning of January 24th, 1989, at the age of 42, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. Outside, hundreds of people cheered, set off fireworks, and celebrated the end of the monster. The women in his life eventually moved on. Stephanie married someone else. Elizabeth finally saw the truth and found a new life. Carol Boone, realizing she had been deceived by his confessions, divorced him before his execution and lived anonymously. Ted Bundy's story remains one of the most chilling in American history, a man who was charming on the outside but a monster within. That brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode. Goodbye.